really excited because I'm about to speak at the Clinton Foundation event about innovative women leaders. And I think as anybody who knows me, anything with the word Clinton in it makes me excited, and it just feels like one of those sort of moments where the universe says, like, thanks for all your hard work on the campaign. You get to be part of this organization that I know you respect and love.
Each year over the past several years. In 2016 alone, TechStyle's fast fashion division shipped over 11 million items. Ladies and gentlemen, Tracy.
So my name is Maggie Haskins. I'm the talent manager at Young Entertainment here in Los Angeles, and I represent actors, writers, and directors, and sort of my focus and specialty is I represent primarily women. So what is that? That's a client. So my day-to-day job is I sort of wear a lot of different hats in efforts to sort of get my clients jobs, both those existing jobs in the marketplace, roles on shows, staffing opportunities, directing opportunities, as well as sort of the fun and challenging part, which is like facilitating passion projects. So I'm part sort of strategist, part sort of architect, sort of trying to build a career, part advisor, and of course part therapist. But sort of stripping away all of that, sort of the business of selling my clients and their ideas and their skill sets, I'm lucky enough to basically play make-believe. So that's why the advocacy portion of what I do is so crucially important to me, because I love telling stories, and I love telling stories by women, with women at the center. And so overall, I just want to put more women in positions of power in the entertainment industry.
Woo! Yes!
More women need to be at the table when decisions are made, because that's where actual conclusive data shows, and we'll get to in a minute. Creators, producers, writers, directors, and then more women are then hired behind the camera, and more women are seen in front.
Woo!
So let's start with a question for you, Mara. I understand the location of women, women's roles, women's voices. Where are we and where do we need to be? What's that gap there? And can you give us some specific examples of how you're affecting that?
Sure. So it's super depressing. So many stats that I'm about to say, and it's funny because where we should be is sort of equal representation across the board. And it's one of these things. I'm going to be talking about sort of women, but obviously I think this applies to people of color, the LGBT community, like all of those sort of. So the central tenet sort of all falls under that. I'm going to be focusing on sort of women right now. So I think the best place to start was there was a Deadline article that I remember reading a couple years ago, and it was female showrunners instrumental to increasing TV jobs for women in study shows. And I remember kind of laughing and being like, well, that's the most obvious thing I've ever heard. Because of course, if you are a woman in power, you look to sort of hire other women, but you also look to hire sort of the best people. You just perhaps see a larger landscape of what that best people is defined. You just got to remind them. Because there's so many things going on. You have to remind them that representation is crucially important, because then it's going to show up on the screen. Sugar, Brian Murphy has this sort of half program, which is 50% female directors on all of his shows that he produces. And I think a big part of it is because it's not just because we're all wearing the future's female shirts. I think it's because people are seeing that it's actually financially lucrative. I think you saw sort of obviously Wonder Woman and Patty Jenkins, but I think you're seeing a conversation that sort of money can be made there. Because it's really funny, because when I was first talking, when I was an assistant, and I was sort of saying that to one of my colleagues, like, oh, I want to represent primarily women. This was a female colleague, and she said, oh, that's too bad, you're not going to make as much money. And I was just like, okay, not going now, I'm going to make millions of dollars. But it's about, what's exciting is that I think you can own it, and you can take ownership. We need to have more diverse representation, and we can talk about it, and that, I've seen my progress in my sort of workplace. When I started sort of attending the director meetings and the literary meetings, when I was first promoted as a manager, I was always talking about sort of female directors, and I started to sign some female directors, so I was sort of talking about that. And it was a conversation that I sort of kept having with the room. And then finally, at one point, I think like 6 or 8 months ago, one of the partners was like, oh, we should put together a list of all the unmanaged female directors who've done television. And of course I was just like, well, yeah, what are we doing over here? But it was great because it meant something sort of stuck in, and they saw that there was going to be the financial reward because they're hearing it out in the marketplace, and we can no longer not have any women directing our television shows. It doesn't make any sense. So that's really exciting, and I've seen it sort of group and sort of the other women and sort of who are agents and executives that are sort of working. I think it's something we're constantly talking about. And then I see it on screen. I think sort of two examples that make me really excited sort of every day. One is Cynthia. She's doing awesome stuff on TBS and sort of comedy and politics, and that's really exciting, and I think it's so important to have that voice, because I think if you line it up, you know, against the John Olivers, who's great, or Trevor Noah on the David Show, they're all, I'm not saying they're all fantastic, but it's so crucial to just like have a lady talking about it, especially with what we've just been through. And then I will bring up Handmaid's Tale, because it's amazing. Terrifying, and really set off interesting, awesome conversations I've had with sort of my peers. And one of the things that I love about that show is actually the showrunner was this guy, Bruce Miller, and he's a male. But when he was interviewed, the showrunner was sort of roundtable. He was great, because he made this thing. It's like, you know, it's not just enough to have a wife, or have sisters, or have daughters, or have, you know, female friends. Like, you've got to have that voice in the room. So, like, those are exciting things, because they're really taking the zeitgeist, and I think they're sort of expanding beyond just sort of female audiences. So I think that's really awesome. Of course, the challenges are, I'd say, like, sort of look at like three of them. One is being a little bit sort of insular as we're pushing sort of our agenda. You know, as I was preparing to sort of be getting these like numbers and facts, and this is my day-to-day job, so I'm always talking about like ladies and power and all of that stuff. And then I like looked at the numbers and I was like, that's terrible. So it is sort of it's making sure that you're expanding out your conversation. If you're going, you know, if your company's having an event that's like women in your industry, let's make sure that not only it's not your own, you're not only inviting just the women from the company, you should invite the men and the women, so they're exposed to the honors and what they're being talked about. You know, I'd say the second thing is we actually need more women representatives. That's really important. So if you have friends out there who are like creative, but maybe haven't found their sort of role in some of the more like traditional creative fields, like that should be a conversation, because I get to play make-believe all the time and talk about cool stuff, and yet I do it sort of from a business perspective. And the third, something is sort of like, I think other people come up with better names, but it's sort of like the second project. So you see a lot of these sort of cool indie filmmakers, and these women directors, they're writer-directors with their first time sort of movie, and it's great, and it's awesome, and then it's like, what's happened? Where are they? Whereas what you see with like, and this is no sort of offense to him, like a Colin Trevorrow who did this teeny little movie for $750,000 called Safety Not Guaranteed, and then Steven Spielberg was like, man, rad movie, why don't you direct the next Jurassic Park? And so part of it is not just saying that we, you know, Catherine Bigelow has to pick out all the female directors and give them all movies. It's saying we've got to sort of think about what that sort of mentor relationship, how that is. I was talking to a client who just wrapped directing her first feature this past April, and she was frustrated. She's like, where's my Steven Spielberg? You know, like, who's going to do that? And I was just like, look, you know, Laura, it might not look like that. You have she put together this really great cast for this movie based off of the strength of her writing, and one of them is sort of like a rising star, and I was like, that can be a relationship. You guys can team up, and she loves you, she wants to read everything you write, she wants to sort of be in it and collaborate. Like, so we also have to recognize that it might not look the same in the trajectory, and that's okay, and that doesn't mean that it's not actually sitting right next to us in terms of the opportunity.
What was your trajectory? Were there any critical mentors or critical moments in your career along the way? Anything that really stood out? And then Shireen, let's start with you.
Okay, so in my tester, and then I went to the other side, as they say. I started the research department at MGA and was the brand manager for Bratz. And that was like dream come true. I got the corner office, I got the toys, I got everything I ever wanted. Yeah. But I started listening to parents complaining all the time about how they weren't positive role models for their daughter. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, I got everything I ever wanted. I got the dream job. Like, even though I got massive resistance and I've always been an outlier, like, what does this mean? So I started having a serious existential crisis.
Half to sort of doing this is a little bit sort of ass backwards, but I always, because I grew up being sort of like the girl that was like one of the boys in terms of like playing on sports teams. Like on my Little League team, my dad was one of the coaches, and the other coaches, they would have me hit first, so they'd have me lead off. So if I got hit, so when I got hit, it would demoralize the other team so much because how dare a girl get hit. And I love that, and I like that. I like being one of the guys. I loved sports. I loved storytelling. I was always there. For me growing up happened, and it was actually, oddly enough, it's not that odd actually, because it was the first time that I really saw, because by then I was playing on girls' teams and all of that, but the 1999 Women's World Cup team was like profoundly impactful, and I didn't even necessarily realize it at the time, but then that fall my field hockey team, we like mimicked their like scrum at the middle, and we sort of did all those things. But it was so crucially important to see, not only sort of see like female athletes, because we'd started to really see them in the boom of the 1996 Olympics, but to see everybody else freaking out about this team. And everybody else, sort of, I think a couple days ago was the first anniversary of the first game of the 99 Women's World Cup, which at that point was 78,000 people. It was the largest audience to watch a women's sporting event live, which would then be surpassed by the Rose Bowl game at Pasadena. But that was really profound, because it was that really first thing. It's like, I haven't been able to see that. So the importance of seeing those stories play out, I think, sort of played into this. So I went to, and then sort of a few things sort of happened, because I thought I was just going to do sort of sports journalism, because it's just my love of storytelling. So I went to Brown. I loved it. My senior year, I went on this goofy open casting call for this ESPN show called Dream Job, where you competed to be a sports center anchor. And I ended up making it on the show. So it was awesome, because my second semester of my senior year, I took like one class and was on a reality television show. So it was pretty cool. I remember, so that was awesome, and we do basically, it was like a Top Chef for sportscasting. And I remember a couple things happened. One, it was the first time I was really hit with the, oh, you should smile thing. At first I was like, okay. But then I started to realize it was only like dudes who were telling me to smile more when I was on camera. And I was like, well, it's weird to smile when you're like talking about somebody breaking their leg. It's not for the rest of the season. And then the second thing, one of the things we had to do, like a debate, PTI, which is a show on ESPN, and I had to debate Tony Kornheiser, because he was one of the judges. And so we go, and the topic was like, is Freddie Adu going to cut through in soccer? And I gave some like really great points talking about Nike signing and marketing, and I'm thinking no matter what, FK would give it a great argument. So Stuart Sock comes up after we've done our debate segment, and Stuart says, so how'd you do, Tony? And Tony Kornheiser says, well, it was like arguing with my daughter. And right then I knew I'd lost, because every piece, it was just that thing, and I was just like, dude. And that was terrible. And so I didn't work, which was great. I got a job at Sports Illustrated. I wrote for their college magazine and their website. It was great. After the first year, magazines being down in business, they shuttered the actual sort of college magazine and made it a website. So they're like, but Maggie, we want you to stay on. We want you to help sort of design this. So we did. And I was supposed to be partnered with my colleague, this other great sports reporter, but he had recently found out that his childhood cancer had come back, so he was sort of battling that. But when we went into the pitch room, I brought him with me, because you're my teammate on this no matter what. So I give the presentation, and I feel like a lot of sort of women can sort of understand this. So I'm giving the presentation, and then when it comes to sort of the question and answer time, the male executives I'm talking to direct every single question to the guy, even though he wasn't talking. So I was 22, just out of college, and I just ran out of it and called him on sobbing, being like, what just happened? Because I'd done this presentation. So those were sort of the first things where I was me being the girl in the boys club. I was no longer just getting away with it, and it was cool. I was starting to have it sort of push back on me. From there, from sports, I started to realize maybe I wanted to be on camera, and I over time sort of realized I just wanted to tell bigger and broader stories and not just be sort of constricted in sports. And I'd say my biggest part is my sister, because she's a writer out here, but just sort of the person that I look up to the most outside of Hillary Clinton. She was like, so I was talking about the business of television, and she was just like, Maggie, just come here and do it. And I think that's another important thing, is that when we think that we should be, if we're on a career path or sort of doing something, I think we have an obligation because other people assume that we're happy doing what we're doing. And what Sarah was, she was like, if you're not happy doing this, like move out to LA, you'd be great. You talk about what my agents talk about, and I don't understand what they're saying. And so I did. And so it's having those sort of those voices and those sort of people who sort of guide you there. And I think I look for sort of mentors in sort of all different places. It's sort of on television, in your peer group, with colleagues that I work with, and they can be sort of male, female, what have you. I think somebody's awesome and doing a great job. Learn more about them, follow them, learn their journey, because that's inherently inspiring. So that's sort of how I thought I was doing TV development, found out what management was, and I was like, this is perfect, because now I get to, as I said, have the make-believe and the advocacy. When you're given the responsibility, don't necessarily always wait for somebody to push you through the door, but like push yourself, because that's the biggest thing. So whether it's in your field and saying, oh, well, I was actually talking to a friend last night about this, being like, wow, what I always try to say to my writers is like, have you thought about directing too? And that is, that's like crucially important, because I think for guys it's just sort of second nature. Like, well, I wrote this, I might as well direct it. So it's constantly sort of testing the barriers. Why can't, you should have a 360-degree career in the same way as sort of men in the industry, and you should be able to see yourself and desire to see yourself as a leader, no matter what career field you're in, and not back away from it.
And speed.
So we did it. It was awesome. The other panelists were fantastic. I think I made it a best friend, and Mara, who went to Brown, interned for Hillary Clinton, and works for the Clinton Foundation. But it was also really particularly cool because I had some of my most favorite people in the audience. So thank you so much for coming tonight.